They may, but let's bear in mind that they're starting very far apart from where Trump and the U.S. and Israel, for that matter, are. And let's remember, it's not just two-way; it's a three-way dynamic here. Even if we exclude the other countries that have very legitimate interests in these outcomes, including India and including the Gulf states. So, yes, they may interest coming from far apart. It's a clear issue in terms of ballistic missiles, in terms of control of the Gulf, in terms of how this will influence the Arab countries on the Gulf, in terms of Iranian support for Hezbollah and the Houthis in Yemen. There's a wide gulf, a figurative gulf between the sides in this. So a settlement may not be easy. Let's hope something can come of this. I hope I'm wrong in terms of my pessimism. Stranger things have happened than my being wrong. But so there is a good chance that the Iranians will at least explore negotiations to end this horrible war. But it's not as though these are two friendly sides who are only inches or feet apart to start.
Let's also bring Netanyahu, who has said that Trump sees a potential deal that would protect Israel's vital interest. What do you think would be vital interest? Because we've heard Netanyahu say and talk about ground combats. He's been talking about eliminating nuclear facilities, which, of course, as of now, we do not know if it has been eliminated or not. Do you think Netanyahu will agree to a negotiation? And what are these vital interests that Netanyahu seems to be talking about?
Israel's vital interest is basically in seeing Iran either have a regime change or fall into such a state of disarray and chaos that, like Iraq and like Syria, it's no longer a threat to Israel, even though it may be a threat in terms of being a feeding ground for undisciplined terrorism, if you will, or chaotic impact on other countries in the neighborhood. So Israel's interest here may be different from that of the U.S. The U.S. may settle, Trump may settle for more of a compromise, or maybe even just more of a face-saving agreement, even though he is forced to back down in a few ways. There's also the dimension of there's another war going on in Lebanon where Israel is going full throttle there and may even be launching a major invasion there soon. To get to your question, I do think it's possible that if Donald Trump says, no, we're stopping this, Netanyahu will go along with it because Israel is dependent on U.S. support. But he may not go down without at least arguing strongly against any kind of compromise, given that Israel's interests and U.S. interests may differ here in various regards.
And that being said, Israel has been waging a war alone without help from U.S. as well. We know Gaza. So do you think that, since you mentioned Lebanon, if at all negotiations happen, do you think that that would include negotiations between Israel and Lebanon?
Could be, but that gets complicated. In some ways, that's even more complicated if it's possible for another situation to be more complicated than Iran is right now. In that negotiations, you've got the Lebanese government, but you've got Hezbollah, which is really who Israel is fighting there. The Lebanese government was supposed to, under an agreement last year, to restrain and actually take arms back from Hezbollah. It hasn't, or maybe hasn't been able to do so. So the notion of negotiation between Israel and Hezbollah, deadly enemies who've been battling each other for many years now, might be hard to see unless it's a temporary ceasefire. But that doesn't necessarily suit Israel's interests, because it wants the Hezbollah threat, as with the Iranian threat to it, to be gone for good. I just want to push back on a little, is the notion of Israel continuing toward without U.S. support. Without U.S. financial and military support, Israel might still be a powerful military power, but it could not do nearly the things that it has done in recent years.
And also, there are, let's go back to, because Trump has been talking about we need a U.S., we know somebody, they've been eyeing the leadership in Iran to be someone who backs U.S. And somehow, Ghalibaf seems to be the name that keeps on coming out. And according to Political Report, there is, who says that we're testing the phase and they are eyeing Iran's parliament speaker, that is Ghalibaf. And then we also have statements coming from Ghalibaf that this seems to be just a distraction, and what Ghalibaf has come out saying that no negotiations have been held with U.S. and fake news is being used to manipulate the financial and oil markets to escape the quagmire in which the U.S. and Israel are trapped. How do you see this? Different opinions coming out where U.S. administration says that Ghalibaf might be, one of the options.
Well, if he is one of the options, he certainly wouldn't admit it. But more broadly speaking, I think we need to circle back to where I started in terms of Trump being an unstable personality. He'll say whatever pops into his head or whatever may suit his very short-term interests, even if it's a lie, even if he's misrepresenting reality. He has a long, long history of that. So when he says that there may be a favored or more amenable Iranian leader that the U.S. could work with, he may be making that up out of whole cloth. In fact, I think it's likely he is. I hate to give credibility to things the Iranians say because they've got their own PR and lies going in some regards. But in this regard, I tend to give them more credibility than he does, than he has in terms of saying who might be an acceptable negotiator, who might be an acceptable leader of Iran. That's not for him or for the U.S. to decide as much as we might want to.
And do you think Iran, at this point of time, of course, the Strait of Hormuz has been one of the most important choke point in this war. How long do you think that Iran can actually go on to defending their stance, according to you?
Let me answer it this way. Really, we don't know how much the U.S. has taken out in terms of Iran's total military capacity, the percentage. It doesn't look good given that we've got an asymmetric war going on where Iran may still have access to thousands and thousands of cheap drones. And on the other hand, we don't know to what extent Iran's attacks have really drawn down the anti-missile defenses that U.S. and Israel and the Arab Gulf countries have. There are other factors at play here, including the possibility of the U.S. launching a ground invasion to at least take over Farg or other islands. But a big X factor here is who's running out of munitions, and we don't know for sure by any means which side is suffering more in that regard.
Also, there's a lot of other contention. IRGC, they have been very continuous with saying that they are going to be, they're going to defend until, they're not going to stopping these attacks, and it's still attacks going on, and Israel's still attacking. Do you think how would you associate Ghalibaf and IRGC at this point, and IRGC as one organization? Do you think they would be willing for a negotiation as well, or there will be a divide there too?
Well, they're the organization, really. They're the real powers, not so far behind the throne. So what they want may well decide what Iran's negotiating position is. Now, is it conceivable that they may say that, okay, if we can survive and we can get some of what we want out of this war, that we'll then agree to some kind of a deal? Yes, that's conceivable, but I do return to the point that these two sides are very far apart, or three sides are very far apart in terms of what they want, what might be face-saving, what might be an acceptable compromise, and the Iranians really may have an interest in perpetuating this to some extent on the theory that as a matter of will they can outlast Donald Trump, given that he's so fixated on the stock market, on his political standing, and on perhaps saving face, that in a battle of wills, Iran, from their point of view, might be able to outlast America.
Also, What is your analysis of these regional countries? We've heard some developments where Pakistan has offered to host talks involving Iran. Turkey's foreign minister has also stepped up diplomatic efforts to speak and spoke to more than a dozen regional and global counterparts over the past 48 hours. Interestingly, the 48 hours there. How do you think would that be leading to any kind of back-channel talks?
Oh, that could well be contributing. I think I'm about to say I was about to say I think the U.S. would certainly welcome such support. Again, with Donald Trump, you just don't know. He just may have whatever little quirks in his personality, deciding in irrational ways whom he's willing to have as an intermediary in these talks. But I think it's feasible that that Pakistan or maybe Egypt, which haven't been attacked, could play a role here in terms of trying to bring the sides together, at least opening up avenues for the two sides to negotiate. One thing you have to keep in mind, and I don't want to defend Iran in this regard, but they've already gone through two sets of negotiations over the past year where things were rolling along, and then boom, all of a sudden Donald Trump attacked them. So you can't blame them, even though you can blame them for all sorts of atrocities and other excesses. You can't blame them for distrusting Donald Trump, even if they're right in the middle of negotiations with him.
And that's very interesting, because considering the fact that most of the leaders that, for example, Ali Larijani or Ali Khamenei has been eliminated, and probably that could have been one thing that they might have talked about, or the U.S. and Israel, that, okay, now that the leaders are gone, maybe the next leaders might be less stringent as other leaders and might be willing to negotiate. Of course, that's something to analyze and a lot of things to analyze, but that's the only time we have. Thank you so much for joining us on the broadcast.
Thank you very much for having me.